But just when you thought our revulsion at Russian war crimes could grow no deeper, along came Bucha, once an affluent suburban home to Kiev's middle and upper class residents. Bucha has provided a horrific punctuation mark in the story of Ukraine's ongoing suffering. Yesterday, the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky visited the area in what appeared to be a harrowing moment for him personally. He declared that the world must go further to limit Putin's ability to wage war. As you'll have seen in the last few minutes, he's just been addressing the UN Security Council. We'll reflect on that in a few moments. Well, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, she's been in Warsaw meeting her Ukrainian counterpart. The Foreign Secretary pledging that the UK would do more to help the Ukrainians by providing extra military support, also introducing more financial sanctions in a bid to hobble Putin's war machine. And late last night, the Ukrainian president praised the Prime Minister and singled out Britain for its response to the crisis. Zelensky said Britain had been brave in its support for Ukraine and that the Prime Minister had taken historical action to combat Russia. Meanwhile, the president appealed to some European countries to do more. Well, let's turn to former UN Special Prosecutor and human rights lawyer Professor David Crane, who's joining us from New York. Professor, thanks for your time. I wonder, well, if you haven't done yet, I'm sure you will, look at the words of President Zelensky addressing into New York, at least from Ukraine, with a message of reform, actually, for the UN, saying the UN needs to get a grip insofar as it possibly can of events in Ukraine, evoking memories of Nuremberg and pointing out that even the worst Nazi war criminals were eventually brought to trial.
You know, we have to use the UN as a legitimate source of jurisdictional power in order to deal with war criminals. So we just can't push the UN aside. I can understand and appreciate and respect, frankly, his frustration. But we do have the capacity, the United Nations, particularly the United Nations General Assembly, does have the capacity to deal with and create an appropriate legal mechanism to deal with the aggression that Vladimir Putin has perpetrated against the people of Ukraine.
Professor, obviously, while Putin's still in place, it's impossible to bring on his head the charges that many are willing to lay. Is it possible, do you think, for the UN to go over Putin's head, if you like, and say to people in Moscow and beyond that this is very much in your own enlightened self-interest to decapitate the leadership, get rid of Putin, and everything changes, hand him over, and you can look forward to better times?
Well, you know, I'm going to answer your question based on just experience. I'm the prosecutor who took down President Charles Taylor of Liberia. We've done this before, and we can do it again. What we need to do is to continue forward with the International Criminal Court building a case against Vladimir Putin for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The UN General Assembly, working with the people of Ukraine, the government of Ukraine, create a special court for Ukraine to deal with the aggression. These mechanisms can move forward. They can investigate and indict Vladimir Putin, even though Vladimir Putin is sitting in the Kremlin. And from there, he is now a legitimate war criminal, and eventually there may come a political moment by which Vladimir Putin can be handed over to an appropriate justice mechanism. We did that with Charles Taylor, and we certainly can do with Putin. And I have to applaud President Biden by plainly saying this guy is a war criminal and he needs to be prosecuted as a war criminal. You know, Vladimir Putin is no longer a legitimate head of Russia, and they'll begin to realize that. And we'll see what happens politically within Russia. But on an international stage, Vladimir Putin has no legitimacy as president of the Russian Federation.
It's an odious comparison, but you mentioned previous war crimes. You've been involved in prosecuting cases against war criminals. When you look at pictures, as we've been looking at them, been shocked by pictures from Bucha, how do we compare them? How do we put them in a framework that allows us to get a sense and calibrate just how awful they were?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have to always remember the victims. This is for and about the victims. And regardless of whether it's in Ukraine or West Africa or Myanmar or Syria, these are victims of atrocities, and they need to be dealt with. What we're seeing in the Ukraine is tragic and horrific, but it's indicative of the war crimes and crimes against humanity that are being perpetrated literally as we speak in other parts of the world and that have taken place in the past. The most important thing about the past is that we dealt with those individuals, the heads of state, the dictators, the thugs, and we prosecuted them. And so we have to do that again in 2022. If we do not do anything about this from a legal point of view, the strong men around the world are watching like crocodiles. And if we don't do anything, then it's going to be a very interesting world indeed.